I first met Clyde 10 years ago at a small diner in Christiansburg, Virginia. I had just graduated with a history degree and a minor in Appalachian Studies from Radford University. Being a transplant from Michigan, I ended up falling in love with the New River Valley and chose to stay here after graduation. There's unfortunately not a lot of work in my field in this area, so I worked for a landscaping company and played historian in my spare time. My goal was to simulate what the Foxfire Heritage Organization had done and create a collection of Appalachian knowledge straight from the horse's mouth, the only real difference being that it would have a distinct NRV flavor. This brings me back to Clyde. While there were a few heritage sites and museums in the NRV, I've learned that the best knowledge from any area comes from the people that have lived there their entire lives. On my days off, I'd scour the burgs, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Radford, trying to find older folks so that I could ask them their stories. The day I walked into that diner in Christiansburg and heard an older man telling anyone who would listen all about the proper way to press sorghum, I knew that I'd found a never-ending fount of knowledge. I introduced myself and told him what I wanted to do. I can say honestly that I've never seen an old man light up the way Clyde did. That first day we talked for close to 2 hours. He dazzled me with stories of growing sorghum, making salt-rising bread, hunting and trapping alone at the age of 10 to provide for his family when times got hard, and all the kinds of things that you'd expect from an old man that lived in Appalachia his whole life. I held up my almost full notebook and thanked him for his time. "Same time next week?" he asked. And so it was for close to a year. We'd meet at the diner, drink coffee, and just shoot the breeze. Our meetings always ended the same way. "Same time next week?" I was gathering a lot of information, and I realized that I might actually be able to write a book based on just Clyde's stories. That thought alone fueled my fire, and I made it my mission to finish my Foxfire-style book, to get it published, and to get as much information as I could about this area from Clyde. My girlfriend, a nice country girl from a little map dot called Fort Criswell, further south in the valley, was incredibly supportive and even suggested that I ask Clyde about some local myths and legends. See if you can get something deeper than the same tired Graham's Forge mansion stories. I bet that would make a really good chapter, she told me one morning while I was getting ready to meet Clyde. "That's not a bad idea, babe. He told me his family were some of the first settlers into the valley. If anyone knows about the land, it's this man." I met Clyde at the same table we'd sat in every Saturday for the last year. "What'll it be this time, son? I ever tell you about when they dammed up the river and made Smith Mountain Lake?" "No, you haven't," I said, "but I actually want to ask you about the local myths and legends of this area." Clyde's face changed. It was a look I'd never seen before on his face. It was fear. "Can't you just use the Google for that? Ain't no sense me telling you a story you can read for yourself." "Actually, Clyde, I wanted to know the stories your family have passed down. You said y'all have been here since the 1670s. Tell me about that stuff." Clyde lowered his voice. His usual smile was gone. "I'll tell you one story. Just one. And then we ain't ever gonna talk about it again. You understand?" I nodded and swallowed hard. Something felt incredibly off. I'll do my best to retell the story from the notes I took that day. "This story is really old, passed down from my granddad's 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 granddaddy. I forget how many greats that would be. Anyhow, back then there wasn't nothing here, just miles and miles of woods and ridgeline. Granddaddy was part of the first scouting party that came down here. Damn near turned back home when he came up on the New River. They knew that with some work they could clear the land and grow crops here. Granddaddy and 3 other men volunteered to stay up here and set up the homesteads while the rest of the party went back east to tell the governor about what they'd found. It was another 6 months before their families made it out to them. Granddaddy told stories about the Indians and great big cats that stalked the homestead on all sides at night. Back then, control of this valley was contested by the Cherokee, the Shawnee, the settlers, and so it's hard to say who or what was really out in the woods. Stories about the great big cats kept getting on for years, and as near as I can tell, they always popped up shortly after the settlers had a skirmish with the savages. People would sometimes go missing after a cat sighting, but that was the way of the frontier. So, What exactly was this big cat? I asked him, grinning. Is, he replied. You said was. You mean what is. It's still out there, somewhere up on the ridge. It's still there and it's looking for blood. For some reason, I felt my blood run cold. I knew this was just a silly old story. Something about the way he said looking for blood made me incredibly uneasy. Okay, so what is it then? The Cherokee call it Iwa. We always called it the Wampus Cat. It's a demon of some sort, supposed to drive a man insane just by looking at it. Way back before whites ever stepped foot here, it used to hunt the Cherokee. The story goes that after a while, the people got sick of it and sent their best and bravest warrior to fight it. Imagine that, one man against a demon. Anyway, Standing Bear went out looking for Iwa and was gone for weeks. And most had assumed he was dead until one night, he came hauling ass back into camp, trying to rip out his own eyes. His wife, I forget her name, vowed to get revenge on the demon that did this, and so she went to the village shaman. The shaman gave her a mask made out of a bobcat's face, and said that if she could surprise the demon, that the spirit of the bobcat could defeat it. So she heads out and she finds the demon drinking from the river. When she jumps out of the bushes to confront it, it turns and sees her mask and starts tearing itself up like it was getting attacked by a bobcat. The demon begged the woman to stop the torment, and the woman struck a deal. She told the demon that if it stopped hunting them and started protecting her people, she would let it go. You all agreed, and the woman took her mask off. The demon was now able to stand and turned itself into a giant bobcat and took off into the woods. So, the Wampus Cat is the protector of the Cherokee. Clyde nodded. And it's still up in the hills looking for blood? Whose blood? Mine, Clyde said with a small smile. By the 1750s, we'd pushed the Cherokee out of the valley, damn near to North Carolina. You know Fort Criswell? Well, it ain't just a fancy name. It used to be an actual fort. They built it around 1761. Well, when they threw up the fort, the Cherokee got real mad and sent a war party up to try and take it from us. And we massacred them. All but one of them. He sent back to his tribe to send message that the valley was ours now. The story goes that he called out Iwa to protect his people. And that's when the Wampus Cat showed back up, started dragging men into the woods, and the men in the fort had to listen to the screams all night, while the old Wampus devoured them or tortured them or whatever he did. They was never seen again afterwards. How it relates to me is this. One of my however many greats, granddaddies, was there. He helped kill all them people. The way I understand it, the Wampus Cat has been hunting the families of those responsible ever since. A lot of those men's families stayed in this area for years. Shoot, I told you my family's been here for forever. Anyway, I'm the last one left. After John McGee went missing on a hunting trip back in '83, I'm the last descendant of the men responsible for the Fort Criswell massacre. I quit hunting after Johnny died, quit going into the woods, and I'm glad I never had no kids, so when I'm gone, it's all over. Come on, Clyde. You really expect me to believe this? I laughed. Believe it or don't, Clyde snapped angrily. It done took my daddy when I was 9, I seen it. Why do you think I had to provide for my family at 10? It dragged him straight out the deer blind, and we never seen him again. I'm sorry, Clyde, I offered, in an apology. Don't be. I know it sounds crazy. I just know it's my time. Won't be long before it finds me and drags me out to hell for the sins of my ancestors. Now, if you excuse me, I best be getting home. And with that, Clyde threw a $10 bill on the table to pay for his meal and walked slowly towards the door. Same time next week? I asked earnestly. Clyde turned and gave me a weary smile. See you when I see you, kid. The next Saturday, I went to the diner, but Clyde wasn't there. 2 more weeks went by and I still hadn't seen Clyde, and so I decided to go to his house to check on him. He was an old man after all, and I needed to make sure he was okay. Clyde's old 1950s model Chevy wasn't in the driveway, and his normally immaculate lawn was now wildly overgrown. I knocked on his door for 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes of no response, I walked around the house trying to peek through the blinds. One blind was broken just enough so that I could see into Clyde's bedroom. I saw his gun safe. It was empty, and there were empty ammunition boxes scattered around the room. I kicked in his back door and rushed into the house, fully expecting to see that he'd taken his own life. Instead, I found an empty house. As I was walking back out, I noticed a note on the kitchen table that said, "Knew you couldn't stay away. If you're reading this, it's because I lost my fight with a demon. The truck is yours if you want it. You'll find it in the Jefferson National Forest." I immediately contacted the police and headed for the Jefferson National Forest. Clyde's disappearance kicked off a weeks-long manhunt, and the only things we found were 2 spent shotgun shells, blood that they determined did belong to Clyde, and giant sets of bobcat prints. One volunteer said that they were at least 3 times too large to be a bobcat's. Clyde's body was never recovered. Clyde's death put a halt on my book. How could I continue? How could I include a story about a demon that killed my friend? It wasn't a bobcat that killed Clyde. It was an ancient evil living in the forest of the New River Valley.